was almost a year ago that James McGrath, a high school student from Shelton, was tragically killed at a party in Shelton. And it's very, very fitting and ironic that we're sitting here on National Victims' Rights Week, ready to vote on members of the Board of Pardons and Paroles, with James's tragic situation as a backdrop. And I'd like to invite James's dad, Kevin, up to say a few words about what we're going to be doing today.
I'm Kevin McGrath. It'll be a year in May when I lost my son, Jimmy. He was stabbed at a house party. We're going through the criminal process right now, which I'd like to thank the Shelton Police. I'd like to thank the State's Attorney's Office for doing a great job. We know this is going to be a long road for justice. After meeting with the prosecutors last month, I woke up to the news channels of sentences being commuted significantly. So I just want to make sure as we go through this process that if the person who committed the crime is found guilty in a court of law, does take a deal with the state's attorney's office, that this is something that's going to be honored, so we could have this part of our lives have closure to it and be able to move on. Because right now, my son has, my son was sentenced to death. My wife, my daughter, myself, my son's girlfriend, my son's friends, we all have a life sentence right now. So we believe if this person is held, is convicted, or does make a deal with the prosecutor, that he does serve out that entire sentence. So I'd like to be an advocate for having a common sense mission to really take a tough stance on crime, because what we're finding is crime is increased in the state and all over the country. Not only is it with juveniles, but it's with adults. We need to hold people accountable. It's very tough to see continually people with a long rap sheet committing violent crime. It's time today that we take a stance against violent crime.
Certainly what's come before us over the last few months is very disconcerting. The sea change in policy that has resulted in many sentences getting reduced without this body being involved in the process. I'm hopeful that in the next month or so that the legislature will be brought back into this process so that families, victims, can once again be assured that their elected officials are making these decisions on what happens to their families and as a result of very heinous crimes in the state.
My name's Audrey Carlson from Newington, and 21 years ago our daughter Elizabeth was murdered by her ex-boyfriend in a premeditated case, who took a 42-year plea bargain ironclad. I first want to thank Governor Lamont from the bottom of my heart for halting commutations and listening to all the survivors who have not had a voice. And this is a picture of our daughter. This is Jan Kritzman, and this is also Linda Binnecade. Her family was also murdered. We are here to basically ask for that policy to be changed, perhaps even into regulations, so that policy cannot be changed again and again.
I'm here today as part of National Crime Victims Awareness Week. Bobby, Barry, and Lauren were murdered, execution style, shot in the head in 2003. This policy has taken two of his murderers and reduced their capital felony A charge down to criminal liability of another person, making them eligible for commutation. This is not political. This is about your public safety. We carry the burden of ensuring those people stay in jail and stay in prison where they can't hurt your families. Giles created a very flawed and dangerous policy, and we're here today to urge our legislators to vote no on his reinstatement to the parole board.
We're seeing more and more of vigilante justice now, I think, throughout the state of Connecticut. And it will only get worse if this lawlessness continues, if we do not hold people accountable, and I am hopeful that the governor will join us in providing accountability and transparency in this process.
We had a roundtable discussion in which we discussed actually taking the commutation policy and codifying something in statute. A lot of our concerns were definitely listened to. I can tell you that it was my impression the governor's office was not running the meeting, they were listening. And I have to give kudos to the governor's office for at least that initial exchange.
Well, there's conversation now, but what is disturbing to me in this whole process is the lack of transparency. And we're seeing in other agencies where laws are being changed, policies are being changed behind closed doors. So I would like this governor to stand up and say, we are no longer going to write policies. We are going to let the legislature write policies through an open and transparent process. And the fact that changes were made and victims were not made aware of all these commutations is really egregious. And so to put everybody on the defensive now and these poor families having to come and try to advocate and stop something that already happens is wrong.